This is New Zealand, located just south of the Pacific Ocean, about 4,000 kilometers away from Australia, and ranked as the second most peaceful country in the world. Most people living in India and Pakistan know New Zealand because of cricket, just like I do. Players such as Brendan McCullum, Ross Taylor, and Daniel Vettori were the reason I first learned about this country. But New Zealand is much more than cricket. It is famous all over the world for its massive mountain ranges, beautiful lakes, and high-quality organic food. Many of you may already know that the world-famous movie The Lord of the Rings was filmed in the stunning valleys of New Zealand. New Zealand's climate is very similar to that of the United Kingdom. Mild temperatures, long winters, and frequent rainfall. However, despite such favorable weather conditions, New Zealand's population is only 7% of the population of the UK. If you look at a map of New Zealand, you will notice something very surprising. Almost 80% of the country is completely uninhabited. About 70% of New Zealand's population lives in the North Island, and nearly 50% of the North Island's population lives in just one city, Auckland. With such pleasant weather, beautiful landscapes, a low crime rate, and a high standard of living, the question arises, why is 80% of New Zealand empty? Let's find out the answer. The truth is, this video is not really about empty land. It is about history and geography. First, if we look at the world map, we can clearly see that New Zealand is extremely far from the rest of the world. If someone travels from Karachi or Mumbai, it takes around 18 to 22 hours of flight time, crossing the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean to reach New Zealand. This leads to an important question. How did humans reach such a remote island in ancient times? There are different perspectives on this. According to New Zealand's official records, the Maori people discovered New Zealand between 1320 and 1350 AD. The Maori originally belonged to the Polynesian islands of the Pacific Ocean. In the 13th century, they left their islands, traveled in large wooden canoes, and eventually reached New Zealand. This was around the same time when the Mongols under Genghis Khan were dominating large parts of Eurasia. But the question remains, why did the Maori leave their original islands and travel such long distances? Maori traditions tell a slightly different story. According to their oral history, New Zealand was discovered much earlier, around 750 AD, by a man named Kupe. Kupe was a fisherman who depended on fishing to feed his tribe. Over time, however, giant octopuses in the region began destroying their fishing traps and eating their catch. As fish was their main source of food, this created serious problems for the tribe. To find a solution, Kupe and some of his companions decided to travel into the open ocean in search of a new land with abundant food resources. Kupe set out into the Pacific Ocean with around 20 to 25 people. After several days of travel, he discovered a large island with towering mountains. This land was New Zealand. It had abundant seafood, fertile land, and no human inhabitants at the time. It was a perfect place to settle. Coop sent some of his companions back to the Polynesian islands to inform others about this new land. Over time, more Maori people migrated and settled in New Zealand. By the 17th century, the Maori lived peacefully in isolation, far away from the rest of the world, with no major external threats. But this peace did not last long. This was the era when Western nations were expanding their power across the globe. European explorers were sent to discover new lands that could be claimed for their empires. In 1642, a Dutch explorer named Abel Tasman reached New Zealand while searching for a southern continent. However, a violent clash occurred between Tasman's crew and the Maori people, forcing him to retreat. Later in 1769, British explorer James Cook arrived in New Zealand. Once again, violent conflicts broke out between the British sailors and the Maori, resulting in the deaths of several Maori chiefs. James Cook eventually left, but this time he created a detailed map of New Zealand. Using these maps, European settlers began arriving in larger numbers during the 18th century. This time, the British used trade and economic incentives to establish ports and settlements. After nearly a century of gradual expansion, the British fully took control of New Zealand. In 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British Crown and the Maori chiefs. After this treaty, New Zealand officially became part of the British Empire. At that time, the Maori population was around 200,000. However, over the next 100 years, their population declined dramatically to nearly 40,000. There were two main reasons for this. First, European settlers brought diseases against which the Maori had no immunity. Second, a series of land wars broke out between the British and the Maori, lasting nearly 40 years. By 1881, Maori resistance was completely crushed. After these conflicts, the British realized that development was not possible without involving the local population. Gradually, Maori communities were included in political and economic processes. This marked the beginning of peace and progress in New Zealand. But the original question still remains: why is New Zealand so sparsely populated? The answer lies in geography. The South Island of New Zealand is dominated by massive mountain ranges. The land is extremely uneven, making construction and infrastructure very difficult. On the eastern side of these mountains, the land is dry and infertile, making large-scale agriculture impossible. Because of these challenges, most people settled in the North Island. To address population shortages, New Zealand relaxed its immigration policies after World War II. Before that, non-white immigrants were largely restricted, which kept the population growth slow. After the restrictions were lifted, people from Asia, especially China, the Philippines, and India, began migrating to New Zealand. And this is how New Zealand became the peaceful, diverse, and developed nation that we see today.